Hold on. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Macy Ashura Langford, but you can call me Ashura. And I am a rising sophomore honors psychology major, biology minor from the Howard University. And I'm also a distinguished member of the second cohort of the Humanities and Social Science Scholars Program. Now, I had the wonderful opportunity to work within Dr. Sarah Brown-Schmidt's Conversation Lab, along with her graduate assistant Zoe, who's with us today. Basically, the whole point of this project is to understand the complexities of conversation and and I'll be presenting research that is done on conversational roles within temporal ambiguity and then how they affect us today. So, before I dive in, let me talk to my ladies right quick. Yep, y'all heard this joke 3 times now. Girls, have you ever been out with your friends and one of them says, "Don't look now, but the boy in blue is looking at you"? And girl, before they can even finish the sentence, you done already whipped your head around thinking, is it blue jeans? Is it the blue shirt? Is it the blue hat? Your eyes are darting, your brain is doing laps, but I'm not gonna judge you because this could be your next boo girl, so I'm not gonna judge. But that confusion right there, that, my friends, is temporary ambiguity. So this study aims to examine what happens in your head when someone says something ambiguous like the guy in blue. You might not know entirely who it is they're specifically referring to, but even if you do figure it out later on, your brain still holds that information on to who the other people they could have been possibly talking about. And so this study wants to see if those leftover ideas stick in your memory or change how you comprehend things later on. Now, this study also wants to see how your role within a conversation can affect what you pay attention to and later on remember. So when we talk, we don't say everything all at once, but language comes out piece by piece. So that means that listeners often have to guess what's next, especially when someone says something vague, like, for instance, the black and white, dog. It could be, or the black and white, my fault. In that brief moment as a listener, your brain might activate several possible, ideas. So for example, the black and white dog or the man in the black and white suit. So prior studies have shown that even if one object gets picked in the end, the other option stays around in our memory, and this leftover activation can influence how we understand language later on. Now, there is gaps. We don't know if this memory bias works the same whether you're a listener or a speaker, and that's because these roles involve different mental tasks. As speakers, we plan and monitor, but as listeners, we interpret and track. So it's possible that these roles shape how we process and remember ambiguous moments. But let me pause, because I know y'all sitting here like, literally, who cares? But let me tell you this, and hopefully you'll care then. Understanding how people process and remember ambiguous language helps us grasp the mental mechanisms of casual conversation. So in high-stakes settings like therapy or teaching, where clarity and memory matter, knowing how the role of speaker or listener can change how we process ambiguity can improve how we design interactive tasks, educational tools, and even language-based artificial intelligence for my ChatGPT lovers. Anybody? No? Okay, just me. Okay. And so for the sample size, we had about 64 native English speakers that were aged between 18 and 40, and they were all recruited through the Vanderbilt SONA system. And for proper eye tracking data, they had to have normal to or corrected to normal vision as well as hearing. So for the design, this was a randomized experimental design using within subject format. So that means that participants can both be the listener and can either be, they switch between the listener and the speaker. I had to make sure I said that right. And so for what they saw a visual scene, as you'll see in the next slide, with 6 images where it'll be the target item, and then the adjective competitor, a noun competitor, a non-competitor, and then 2 filler items that had nothing to do with the target item at all. So like I said in the previous slide, it's going to be about 6 images, and for the speaker only, it's going to have that green box to outline what the target item is so that they can read it out properly. And like I said, for the filler items, they have absolutely nothing to do with the rest of them, as you can see. And so for our procedure, it was divided into 3 phases. First, it was a study trials where participants were assigned a random role, either be a speaker or a listener, and asked to name the target item. We tracked their eye movements during the task, and then the next phase is the repeated trials, where participants viewed a modified version of the scene and then were asked to interpret an ambiguous description and identify the referent. And this happened in a 3-to-1 comprehension to production ratio. And importantly, eye tracking continued during this phase to observe real-time resolution of ambiguity. And so we see with our final, we have the memory test, which uses a 2 alternative forced choice design. And participants were selected between 2 items that they had seen earlier, allowing us to measure which reference were better retained depending on their role during ambiguity. So for analysis, specifically what I did is we used Pratt coding to precisely code the onset critical linguistic regions, specifically the adjective and the noun. And so this allowed us to anchor our eye tracking data to the moment in which each part of the phrase was heard. We could separate the models by for speaker and listener trials and include interaction terms to assess whether memory and fixation patterns varied by communicative role. So using Pratt was especially important as we could pinpoint exactly when a participant said a black and white bag and see how visual attention shifted in real time, also seeing the moments that they recall an item from earlier trials. So our eye tracking results were consistent with role-based processing differences. For our speakers, they showed a strong anticipation fixation to target items before they even began speaking, while listeners in contrast initially looked at both the target and the early competitor when hearing the adjective. But once the noun was introduced, fixations to the competitor dropped off and focus returned to the target. This shows that listeners temporarily entertain multiple possible references until they hear enough information to resolve ambiguity. And so that you understand what this kind of graph is saying, the thicker line will be the speaker and the thinner line will be the listener. And you can see that the different colored arrows show us what when they saw the target and then when they didn't see the target and when they transferred their attention to the different things, to the nouns. So from these findings, we have expected results. So we believe that the listener can have a better memory of early competitors because they were actively considered during the interpretation. And then we think that meanwhile, the speakers are likely to have stronger memory for the target as they were planning to refer to it, but weaker memory for competitors since those were less relevant during production. And so, like I said, listeners are expected to have better memory for early competitors compared to their late competitors, and speakers will show a stronger memory for late competitors compared to our early competitors. And so for role-based effects, we think that the speaker role will appear to reduce ambiguity-driven competition in visual fields, and that the listener's roles encourages parallel activation of possible references. So to summarize our findings, we could point out three main conclusions. We believe that temporary ambiguity leaves a trace in a memory, especially for listeners, and the role we occupy, whether it be speaker or listener, shapes how we process ambiguity in real time, and that the integration of linguistic and visual information unfolds differently depending on communicative perspective. And then for what's next in future research, we believe, or specifically, I believe that studies should research future effects of repeated ambiguity exposure on memory, and then compare the different types of ambiguity beyond just noun phrases, as well as look at individual differences, so to see whether working memory or cognitive control could have an effect on our results, as well as apply to a broader context, so whether it be more natural communication, whether it be education or language-based AI, like I said before, and then link it to neurocognitive data, so for example, like EEGs or fMRIs to see what goes on in our brain during conversation. So again, my name is Ashura Langford, and I'm a sophomore from Howard University. And I want to say thank you to my faculty advisor, Dr. Sarah Brown-Schmidt, as well as her wonderful graduate assistants, Mary and Zoe, for just supporting me throughout this whole time. Thank you to the Leadership Alliance Consortium, as well as the Vanderbilt Leadership Alliance staff. Y'all are wonderful. Y'all have made my time here absolutely amazing, as well to the people who fund this wonderful experience for me. I also want to just say overall, thank you to Vanderbilt for having me here. Love me some Vanderbilt. I love Nashville. And yeah, thank y'all all for listening and being here to support us.